Hello, welcome to this video. My name is Terry Lee Shield. I am host here at Love School. In the video today, I'm going to explore the idea of personal responsibility in relationships. And this video kind of does link with another couple of videos, a couple where I'm just like this, where I talk about unmasking might be relevant, and when I talk about our fear of feeling might be relevant. And I've also done a video lately about manipulation in relationships. Because it kind of all links a little bit. So I'll put those links to those videos in the description. So if you're interested in this topic, have a little look at them. But for now, I just wanted to talk a bit about personal responsibility, what we bring into our relationships. Relationships aren't always easy. Sometimes they can be, or there can be periods in relationships that are easy, and then there can be periods when we come up against conflict, we come up against disagreements. There isn't a match of energy. We want different things, whatever it might be that comes up that causes us a little bit of difficulty, and they're not straightforward to navigate. And relationships has been a big thing for me. Working through lots of complex relationships, trying to improve my relationships, especially when like unmasking and being more authentic and revealing more of myself and creating more intimacy in relationships. Realizing that was a desire of mine and kind of being more intentional in my relationships and things. And I feel like over the years, I've built lots of skills in relationships, in my communication, in my expression in various different ways. And what I've realized, it's just been an interesting week for me in regards to my relationships at times. Doesn't matter how much we do, sometimes there's just differences with people. Differences with people we love and care about very much. Differences with people where we might want something and they don't want to give it, or we don't want to give something that they want. And just navigating all of that, especially when we're doing it consciously and we're doing it without manipulation, and we're trying to be honest and integral and respectful and all that stuff that takes us away from what can be considered toxic relationships or toxic dynamics or harmful dynamics. It can be difficult. It just can be, even if you're masterfully skilled. And one thing that I've just had to reflect on myself is, and what feels infinitely better, is if I know I have done my best. I'm not saying it's the best or that there's no limitations of my own, or I haven't contributed to maybe difficulties we're having or anything like that, but just when you've done your best you can do, even if it's not perfect, and you know that there's nothing really more that can be done, especially not right now. Like sometimes you just have to give these things time and space and just let emotions process, let situations evolve a little bit, and see if there's not a time demand on something that comes up in a relationship. Sometimes, giving it the time and space it needs to develop is really sensible. One of the things that I had to learn a lot about is like boundaries, and our boundaries in relationships. It's like where we end and the next person begins, and then we create a boundary around the relationship where that ends and the rest of the world begins. And then also we've got like boundaries within ourselves, like what we can give and what we can't, or what we will give and what we won't. And navigating all of that in relationships, especially if you've grown up without being, have those skills given to you, shown to you, developed within you. If you've been particularly open, if you've been suffered with abuse, if you have been manipulated in relationships often, if you have been groomed, any of this stuff can lead us to become adults who don't have boundaries or don't know how to exert our boundaries. And especially as you get older, I find relationships just seem to get even more complicated. Probably because we do as adults, you know what I mean, and our life becomes more hours and the stakes are higher potentially. People are parents, people have homes of their own, mortgages, all that. I think when you're young and carefree, you don't have any of that extra stuff, do you? And even then, the relationship's complicated. We can be navigating ideas of our own expectations for relationships. Expectations is a funny one because sometimes we can't really put expectations onto others necessarily. That might involve some shadow work that we have to do in ourselves and understand what we're kind of expecting from someone. Expecting feels like a lot of like taking what necessarily doesn't want to be given, but having standards for ourselves as well, like just knowing that we're not going to tolerate certain behaviors, or we're not going to like I say, especially if you're recovering from relational trauma or anything like that, we're not going to diminish our value or worth in order just to please someone else or have a connection with someone else. These things can be difficult. And what I've learned is the more we can be honest, the more that we're honest with ourselves, the more we can be honest with each other in a way that is authentic. So even if it's not perfect, even if our emotions do get heightened in it, and if our emotions get heightened, we might want to like back off and give it a bit of space. Like I say, let things process a bit, get clearer. I've done a blog about this. If you're interested, I'll link it, called The Atomic Structure of a Relationship. If we can relate with people from a neutral place, if we feel heightened emotions, give it a bit of time and space, back off, come back to neutral, I find that the communication is stronger in it. And I also find we get more clarity around our own boundaries and we're not feeling quite as defensive about it. And we get clearer on our own standards and what we will or won't tolerate in a relationship, or what we do and don't want. It's not to be about tolerating. It's just like, look, I really do want and need this. And if that person can't provide it, there's like an honest conversation that has to happen. Like, if they can't provide it and then nobody else is going to provide it, is it better to have the relationship than not have it? Is the option of having someone else meet that need for us, that thing that we would like in a relationship? Is the chance that someone else might meet that need for us, is that worth pursuing? And how are we going to realistically live with that in between phase of like, well, if I really feel like I want to need this thing in a relationship and this person can't give it to me, or can't give it to me to the level I would like, or anything like that, and I don't want to compromise on certain things, I don't want to lower my standards, I don't want to lower that boundary, I don't want to be flexible about it, then the reality is, if we cut off that relationship, then we've got a whole period when we're not going to get it at all. And we might never get it. Who knows? You might be. You know what I mean? Like I say, you might then realign and meet somebody else who is willing to meet that need. But there's going to be a period, like a realistic period, where that's not being given to you. So what I'm saying is taking responsibility of considering the reality of relationships, of our expectations, of holding our boundaries, of these expectations, these standards, these things that we have to protect us. Sometimes we can end up missing out on a connection when actually maybe that wasn't necessary. We just need to maybe give it a bit more time and space. Life can be a bit complicated when we consider these things and relationships, because there's a lot of narrative around at the minute. Like if we're not perfect in relationships, if someone can't meet their need, move on to the next, having these high standards, especially among women. I don't know what the conversation is in men's spaces. And I think this is a development a lot from facing our abuse, facing our trauma, realizing that we're not going to tolerate certain behaviors, manipulations, abuse, and all that. And if that is something that you have been struggling with, we have got a course in Love School about that. Freedom from Illusions looks at manipulations, looks at power plays or power dynamics, and how we can get coerced and controlled and abused by people. If they really struggle with that sort of thing, and you do need to kind of clarify all that would be a brilliant course to begin with, to look at. But when it's not abusive, and when it's not intentional manipulation, and when we're being very aware of our own behavior as well. So we're obviously not crossing any lines. We're not being manipulative. We're being honest, holding our integrity, doing the very best we can. Sometimes that is just the reality. They might be doing their best. We might be doing our best. And that is the line of personal responsibility in relationships. If we're both doing our best and it's still not quite right, sometimes there's nothing that can be done. So that could be a case of just a bit of space. That could be space apart, or that could be space together. Because sometimes the grapple, the conflict, it's not going to figure it out anyway. If we're both doing our very best in relationships, in the relationship, if there's no harmful stuff going on, if there's no intentional manipulation, if there's certainly, obviously, if there's nothing abusive like that, if we're both just holding our boundaries, sometimes it just needs to be left alone. And like I say, that might be apart, space apart. Let things change. That's what I'm trying to say. See what happens when we come back together. Sometimes it might be just staying together, just taking along in the relationship, not addressing whatever the issue is. Just let it be dissatisfactory for a while. Just let it be a bit uncomfortable for a while. And then address it when it becomes relevant. Again, see if anything's changed. Sometimes our boundaries can naturally soften or firm. If something becomes really intolerable, then we just know we can't put up with it anymore. Sometimes we might just realize I was living in ideas and actually this is fine. You know, I would rather have this than be without it. And that's a fine decision to make. I feel like there's a lot of dismissal amongst relationships at the minute. Like if it's not perfect, if it's not ideal, then we just shouldn't tolerate it. And life's not that simple. Humans aren't that simple. Relationships and connections aren't that simple. And we all develop at different rates. We all have different skills. We all have different preferences. And they can change. So it could be sometimes we need to give space for the other person to catch up, decide if they want to catch up. You know what I mean? We might, as long as if we are doing the very best we can with our communication, and you're like, you know what, right now, I don't want to get any better at communicating. That is the best I can do at communication. Or that's what the other person is saying. Like, you know what, I can't communicate this in any other way right now. And you know what, I have other priorities. I cannot be focusing right now on perfecting my communication. My communication right now is just going to have to be inadequate. And if you can't accept that, then that's just the situation. You know, that's as far as our personal responsibility goes. We don't always have to be evolving and growing. And I know that might sound funny considering I host a space that is about constantly evolving and growing, but we have to respect this natural like expansion and sometimes contraction even of our growth. Sometimes we just have to accept that things aren't perfect and they're going to be a little bit difficult or they're going to be a little bit uncomfortable for a while. We can't always strive for perfect. We can't always strive for easy. We can't always expect that from others and each other. There's a lot going on in the world energetically as well that all impacts us, and then that's like on a global scale, never mind on like a national scale in our communities or then in our personal lives with other people and relationships. We can't always be prioritizing our personal development. We're always growing, we're always evolving anyway. And I think life gives us these circumstances. And sometimes we are literally just faced with the circumstance of this isn't perfect and it's not going to change immediately. We've reached our limit. We've reached our capacity right now. And until more space is created, whether that be through the natural expansion of circumstances or that it becomes so intolerable that we realize that we can't stay in it because of the natural contraction of a situation, we just have to live with the discomfort and be responsible and be aware of that, you know? we are responsible for our growth. So if we can reflect on a situation and we're like, you know what, I really do need to work on my communication skills. I really do need to do that. And we're taking that responsibility. But then we're also like, but you know what, I don't have the capacity in my life right now. That is responsible enough sometimes. Then other times it's like, right, when I get the time and space, then I do need to look at it. And then if we've got the time and space and we're refusing to look at it, then we need to accept the responsibility of the consequences that that other person then might not be able to tolerate us not doing that work, if that makes sense. Navigate some of the duality around it, some of the complexity in relationships and things, and just respecting the fact that sometimes we do need time and space and things aren't going to be perfect and we can't expect other people to be perfect. And sometimes we just need to chill out with ourselves, with others, and we'll know when it's intolerable, is what I'm saying. Sometimes a bit of discomfort is just fine. A bit of mundane, a bit of it's not quite right. We just kind of have to go with. It's just part of life. And as long as we are being responsible for ourselves, for taking care of ourselves through the process, communicating to a point that it's relevant, welcome, and then being responsible for whatever consequences come from either our action or our inaction, that's all we can do and be. That is, in fact, that's an amazing level of just consciousness and being bloody human. Just wanted to say that. So thank you. If you're interested in this in relationships, we've got a couple of things that you might want to deep dive in if you have got the time and space for it. In Love School, if you do want to improve some of your skills, we have a whole bundle which is Healing for Connection, which has got a few different courses in there. So that might be like something you might want to consider investing in, because it includes a few different courses that all kind of feed into each other, and maybe it's going a bit deeper of why we might struggle in connections if we're ready to really dive into it. It's a fairly small course, is being yourself in relationships. If your relationships are struggling because actually some of the stuff I'm talking about, you're like, well, I'm not sure about my boundaries, or I'm not sure about what I want from a relationship, or I'm not even sure I'm showing up as my responsible, authentic self, then you really might benefit from the Being Yourself in Relationships course. It's a video-based course initially, and there's got a few like different bits of learning and prompts and things in there. But that might be a really insightful place to start, to make sure that you are able to show up at least as yourself and being authentic in your relationships as a starting point. Let me know what you thought about this video. I'm open to any feedback, questions. You can either make them in the comments. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Or if you want to contact me, if you need one-to-one support, or you just want to kind of send a message privately, the email is mail@loveschool.uk. Thank you for watching this video. I'll see you again in another one. Bye.